Recording in progress.
Our guest today is Armando Vasquez Ramos, President and CEO of the California Mexico Studies Center at Cal State University of Long Beach. Armando, welcome to HealthCare UnTold.
Muchas gracias.
Well, it's such a great honor. And, we've known each other for many years since I was a teenager. And we just got reconnected due to JT brought us back together in terms of he has a legacy photo exhibit at the Historical Society of Long Beach. And so I was able to talk to the curator of that. And, I found out that there were several of you who put that exhibit together in honoring a place where both of us worked together. Myself as a teenager, as a student worker there at Centro la Raza in Long Beach. And you were the director and became the director. And what an incredible experience I had as a young person there, Armando, during the Chicano movement. And so many of you students who came from Cal State Long Beach and really provided so much service to the city and the people of Long Beach. So I just want to welcome you to the podcast, and we really want to hear about you, Armando, and how you started at the Centro and the work that you're doing now in Cal State Long Beach.
No, I'm actually now retired from Cal State Long Beach. I retired about 12 years ago. And I decided to create a nonprofit, which is the California Mexico Studies Center, which I operate from my home. And this is how I've been doing for the last 10 years, a Dreamer Study Abroad program that has given me a chance to take now over 800 dreamers to return home to their birthplace, to enjoy reconnecting with their families, to enjoy Mexico as adults. And of course, the reason that I started this program was to give them an opportunity to empower them, because if they have DACA, they are eligible for a special travel, international travel permit, which is based on either for humanitarian reasons or for employment purposes, or in this case, what I discovered that I could create a program for educational reasons. So our Dreamer Study Abroad program really is an opportunity for them to re-enter the U.S. legally. With this permit that's provided under DACA, they wipe out the prior undocumented entrance when they were brought in as minors. And through marriage, they get their green card in less than 6 months. That was the political reason that back in 2014, I started this idea of giving the dreamers this opportunity, but also for them, in some cases, for more than 30 years, they haven't been able to go back home. They have lost loved ones without being able to be by their side or with the family. And of course, in this case, many of them have even parents that have been separated by deportation, by the separation of families. That is the most God forsaken consequence of the repression of immigration policies in the United States. Because we have seen, especially during the Obama administration, the deportation of almost 3 million immigrants. And nobody dared to say that Obama's administration was the worst, because of those 3 million deportations, 96% were Latinos. More than 2 million were Mexican origin, and probably 750,000 Central Americans. So what really happened during that period of time, it also forced the exile of almost 1 million U.S. citizen children that are kids that they deported took home with them because they weren't about to leave them here. And in some instances, many of them that could not retrieve their kids lost them to the adoption system. And so it's a real tragedy what not only Obama, followed by the 4 years of Trump, And now, during the 3 years of Biden, we have seen a renaissance in what should be adhering to the principles of the United States, being able to accept refugees, folks that are seeking asylum because of persecution and other reasons. But also, we have seen since our time, I'm going to date you, since
Good,
the
good.
60s and the 70s, we have
Yeah,
seen tremendous growth in the Latino population of the United States. And so migration was not the reason for the last 30 years, since the 90s, Latinos in the United States have grown exponentially, 15 million per decade. In 3 decades, we have seen the growth of 45 million Latinos in the United States. See, and that's what has the right wing, the racists, the supremacists scared to death. And they are afraid no longer about the reconquista, the invasion. The invasion has already taken place. And they are right next door to you, and they are not actually employing people that are dependent upon this workforce. Because as you know, California is about to become majority Latino.
that's right. That's right.
And of course, this is very, very threatening. Now, the hate that comes with Trump got out of the closet all of these races that we thought we had left behind in our struggle for civil rights in the 60s and the 70s. They came right out of the woodwork. And we have today an even more polarized, I would say even worse conditions than we faced in the 60s,
I would
which was
say that
already
too.
pretty darn crazy when we
That's
had to
right.
deal with KKK here in Orange County, the Orange Bird Society, and
That's right.
racism by institutions. Because again, dating back when I started at Cal State Long Beach in the January of 1968, we were less than 100 Blacks and Chicanos. Most of us had come in through the Educational Opportunities Program that was established here at Cal State Long Beach by our dearly and beloved Dr. Joseph White. And Joe White was an African American that created this special program, and that's how he brought me into Cal State Long Beach, because I was attending high school in East LA, and I was going to college. I was going to LA Trade Tech to become a kick-ass auto mechanic. And
The best.
Joe White changed my life. But this is right after graduating from from Lincoln High School. When I arrived at Cal State Long Beach, 2 months later, the East LA High School walkouts took place.
The
And
blood.
it was led by my teacher, Sal Castro. Sal was my mentor in high school. Never was I involved in student leadership roles or politics or anything. I was an auto mechanic. I was a very, very poor athlete. And of course, his inspiration for the walkouts, which exploded in March of 1968, created a fusion that gave me purpose here at Cal State Long Beach, because I had already become part of this civil rights movement led by the African Americans, but we were also connecting with what was happening in New Mexico with the land grab movement led by Reyes Lopez Tijerina, what was happening in California and many other places, the National Farm Workers Organizing Committee, established and led by Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta. And of course, there were other movements that also were growing, especially in Denver, the leadership of Corky Gonzalez and the Crusade for Justice. So all this was going around us in that first 6 months of 1968. I became somebody. And he was the inspiration of Sal Castro and Joe White, but because there was also a social movement, as well as we had a war that was an anti-Vietnam War movement, but also we had a war on poverty in the
Mhm,
United States. And this is something that even Obama failed to reestablish.
mhm.
Obama kept on saying government cannot create jobs. Well, you and I wouldn't have come together if they had not been jobs for young kids like yourself.
That's right.
We had through the East Long Beach Neighborhood Center, later to be known as el Centro la Raza, 450 kids every summer that we
Yes.
employed. And we were kids of 20, 23 years of age. I was only 24 when I took over as director of the Centro. And I knew nothing about running an operation, but every day was a learning experience.
That's
So I
right.
owe everything to, we spoke about Sal Castro, we spoke about Joe White, but also that great white father known as Rod Martin, who was the director of El Centro de la Raza when he was first opened in 1969. And, just to, encapsulate the history of how we became a part of that, the student movement at Cal State Long Beach, which transformed from UMAS, United Mexican American Students, when we first started in the fall of 1967, to then later becoming MECHA. After the April of 1969 Plan de Santa Barbara conference that was held at UC Santa Barbara. And that gave us the blueprint for us as students to come back to our universities to establish Chicano studies departments. And that's what we did here at Cal State Long Beach. 6 months later, I was one of the student leaders that were co-founders of the Chicano Studies Department. But one piece, one element of El Plan de Santa Barbara called for students to take the university to the community in the form of barrio stations. And this is exactly what we did. We took over the East Long Beach Neighborhood Center democratically. We uh, got elected. We elected out actually an advisory committee that was set up to oversee the neighborhood center, but they were a bunch of rednecks,
Mhm.
and they were Cuban refugees that were right wingers like they were. I mean, if you thought about MAGA today, that was them back then.
That's right. That's
And
right.
they were pressuring Ron Martin to deny us access, because I became the point person to provide Rod the offer to say, look, we can liberate you. We can democratically take over the advisory, and we got a bunch of students that were already living in the community because we were
Mhm.
coming to Cal State Long Beach.
That's right.
And we were very politicized in the form of organizing through this vision of a community station that would be the extension of our organization. And this happened also in many other places, in Santa Barbara, Casa de la Raza, in San Diego. Today, they still have the barrio station that Arturo Cázares, Jose Cázares' brother, was the first director. And see, this is how far back we go.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm proud to say that about a month and a half ago, they honored me for a lifelong achievement award by the Barrio Station in San Diego.
That's
Uh,
beautiful, Juan Mando.
it's again connecting with those original institutions that we created because we had nothing.
That's
We
right.
didn't exist in higher education. And I'm proud to say not only that we established a Chicano Studies program at Cal State Long Beach, but also that, frankly, today we're about to become more than half of the enrollment at Cal State Long Beach. From
Wow.
less than 100 Black and Chicanos in 1968, today out of 37,000 students is like 48% Latino. And
That's
I should
wonderful.
also point out that it's almost 2 to 1 Latinas to Latino males.
Wow.
Women
Wow.
kicking ass
Yeah.
every front at every level, and they're graduating with that same proportion, 2 to 1. And that's a problem that we need to face. We need to do something about our Latino males. They
Yes.
are stuck. They're stuck in another world, and perhaps it's kind of corny to compare to when we started. It was all males because
Mhm.
the families wouldn't let the women go to college. We would
That's right.
recruit. We would go out and talk with the parents. Said, no, no, your daughter's going to be safe. She deserves it. She has the grades. She can get a scholarship. Now I dare to say women in our community have that challenge to do something about our male population, because quite frankly, it's the women that give birth to those males, and they're not a good reflection of them. Today we have so much problems with the high number of imprisoned Latino males, the high number of law writing, gang banging pendejos that are losing their future because they're not preparing to go to college. The women are. And of course, in the employment front, they are appeased by a dead end job like working for UPS or Home Depot with benefits, you know.
Yeah.
So it's almost like a flip of what it was, more than 5 decades ago. And the
Yeah.
challenge is still the same. We have made great gains in higher education, but we have so much more to go, because in proportion to what we were in terms of the size of our population, we were less than 5% in the United States of America in the 1960s. And this is what I wrote as a portion of the narrative of this exhibition, was that we knew what was happening in our community. When we began to organize in Long Beach, we realized that it wasn't only the students that were coming into Long Beach. It was families, it was workers that were coming into a different space that was giving them opportunities for employment, affordable housing, and then, of course, away from the madness of LA. And of
Yes.
course, for many other places that were coming into Long Beach. But the fact is that in the 1960s, the city of Long Beach grew 400% from the 1960 census that counted only 7,500. Uh, they called us in 1960 the Spanish speaking Americans. By 1970, and this is already at the height when we have become the leadership of Centro la Raza, uh, we realized that the 1970 census had counted 28,000. 28,000, and that time was no longer Spanish speaking Americans. They called us Mexican Americans. And at that point, it was like, wow, where are they at? Well, we have historically in Long Beach two parts of the city that have had Mexican communities, Mexican population, mostly around the labor camps in the
Mhm.
west side
Mhm.
and also in the east side. Around that area where you may recall Redondo and PCH, known as Zafaria. Nobody knew what Zaparias was. That was the barrio way back in the early 1900s. That was where the Mexicanos had a community. And of course, in the west side, there's various parts of the west side where they had grown. But again, they were marginal. And in downtown Long Beach,
That's
right
right.
next to the huge development that grows in the 1970s in downtown Long Beach, was a huge barrio, which was like opposites. This modern sky. skyscrapers next to a shanty town.
Mhm.
And it was like that all the way until the 1980s and perhaps even the 1990s. Now all that area has been eradicated. They built a Cesar Chavez Park, and there's a Cesar Chavez Elementary and an Edison Elementary in that area. And this is where now we are working with an organization that literally became an extension of Centro de la Raza. Uh, this is the organization known as Centro Cha. Uh, Centro Community Hispanic Association. That was their original name. They never changed it. But the current director, she's been the director for almost 30 years now, was one of the kids that went to work for us at the Escuelita.
Wow.
Do you remember Jessica Quintana? She went to
That
Poly.
name, she went to Poly. Yeah.
Do you
I went
remember
to
her?
Poly too.
I know you did.
Yeah.
Well, you need to hook up with her. And
I
she knows
will.
about it because she
Yeah,
knows
I
about it.
will. I
She's a West
will.
Sider. And,
Yeah.
and I must say that one of the worst things that we did through the Centro is we created this Longo identity,
I know.
you know? And that became then West Side Longo and East
Hmm.
Side Longo. It's like, oh, what a nightmare. Because
Yeah.
those are still the gangs. But that was the socialization process in our
Yeah.
community.
Yeah.
And the community in downtown where her and her family landed from Denver, Colorado, Jessica grew up in Barrio Pobre. Do you remember where Barrio Pobre was at?
In the West
Downtown
Side.
LA. In that little corner. Well, that now has become a division of a Latino cultural center
It went.
and El Mercado de Long Beach. And
Wow.
that's what we're still working on. I've been a sort of a historical advisor, and I've worked with them in some of the politics and all of that. But this is thriving, and of course, she will be someone that you need to reconnect with.
I will. I will. I will, Armando. I will. And it's so interesting because having grown in downtown Long Beach, kind of on the edge of downtown Long Beach, going to Poly High School, Long Beach Poly High School, where it was they basically, it was a segregated school. And then we became integrated. And
Yes.
so we had youth from West Side, from East Side, from all over Long Beach, Country Club Drive. So it was a real mixture of, it was the first time I've ever met Jewish students, white students that I went to school with, because I
Yeah.
was always in African American communities in San Diego. And when I came to Long Beach, I was one of the few Latina at one of the elementary schools right across the street from Long Beach Poly.
Yeah.
And there
Yeah.
was busing programs that would take us
Yes.
to the Bixby Knolls area to go to school. And so I had that experience, and then working with starting at the East Long Beach Neighborhood Center, and then turning and watching these estudiantes coming from Long Beach, Cal State Long Beach, was such an incredible eye-opening experience for me, and embracing me as one of the mentees and working in between the young kids that we had in the escuelitas, and also being able to being able to participate in some of the programming. And I did a lot of the food programs, and then I also did the youth programs at the Central. So I got my administrative abilities during
Yeah.
those summers. And in fact, I was one of the lucky ones that got to work during the school year as well.
Yeah. Well,
And
and I'll add you to the list of so many that I've encountered over the years that say,
yes,
I got my first job at Centro la Raza. And
that's
they
right.
gone on to become very successful professionals.
Yeah,
It was that inspiration that was part of that era. And I'm afraid that today we don't have that.
I know.
We have grown exponentially throughout the state, but our community is direly in need of leadership.
Yes,
I'll say it, and I will not get tired saying, our youth, our students are asleep at the wheel.
Mhm.
There's no will. There's no motivation. There's no spirit. They have become, and part of this is the isolation of the pandemic. But let's not blame it all on that.
Yeah.
It comes from the home. Our parents are still living in a state of terrorism if they're undocumented.
Yes.
That's what it's called,
Absolutely.
state
Absolutely.
terrorism. That's what we were dealing with Trump. And this is a point that I had become already engaged with not only the Dreamers program, but I realized that it wasn't only the Dreamers. Going back to, I mentioned to you my training with former Congressman Alan Lowenthal in the Masters in Clinical Psychology, Community Clinical Psychology at Cal State Long Beach, involved diagnosing mental health issues in communities, not an individual, and saying, oh, you have schizophrenia. No, you're paranoid. Oh, take this medication and you're going to feel well. You're depressed. You have stress. Our communities have a collective mental health disease, and this is was not being addressed. And right before the pandemic, I was starting to, I developed a presentation around organizing, creating a model of organizing parents, immigrant parents, and for the schools to host something like a PTA for immigrant parents,
Mhm.
create self-defense groups that would support each other in case, especially the worst case scenario, deportation.
That's right.
Who were you going to leave your kids with if you don't come home and you were deported from work or from on your way to the clinic? And of course, that also came to an end because of the pandemic. So everything shut down. And I tell you, that's exactly what we need to do if Trump gets back into office, because
And
he's
I wanted to ask that about you and about from you. I'm going to start that again. I wanted to ask you, Armando, about that future that we see with Trump already talking about deportations and mass deportations. And it's a little bit of your advice and your consejos, Armando, as a long-term or community organizer and an activist. What can we do to ensure that we protect ourselves in the future and that we have there's two people vying for this position, and I know you even had to sue the Biden administration for the work that you were doing for Dreamers, and so we're always caught in this dilemma at the time of elections,
Yep.
that the worst of evils or the worst of who's the worst that's going to be, and we know from being working as Democrats for so many years
Yeah.
that that's really important, but people are losing faith and hope. And to have Trump being the person that people are talking about is pretty frightening issue. And as you said, even more frightening than we went through in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s. So give us some of your consejos, Armando, for our listening
Yeah,
audience.
I think going back to the comment I was making about state terrorism, that's exactly what this second coming of Trump represents to me. Is the re-election of Hitler now
Yes.
with a full force, no need to veil what his intentions are. He's letting us know right now, and we are still as a community asleep at the wheel. Now, I don't blame that on our community. I hold responsible our elected officials.
Mhm.
What are the elected officials and the national leaders? And in comparison to the African American community, well, they're also fairly marginalized as well. But they wouldn't be sitting on their hands if the attack was on them. And also, the fact is that our community, amazingly, has a very high percentage of idiots voting for Trump. They have voted twice already in the 30% range for Trump. Who are these people? How can you accept that he's talking about you. He's talking about
Yeah,
your grandma. He's
that's
talking
right.
about your community, but somehow you buy in. How can you be a Republican and be a Chicano, Latino, Mexicano? It's impossible. But here's the simple logic: they have bought in to the same message of hate. They are also as recipients as well as um, buyers of this mentality that is no different than Nazism
That's
and
right.
is bravado. It's this mentality, and I will not use the term macho because that's so tainted. It really is a supremacist mentality, and a fascist is short. What he's telling us is fascism in his bluntest terms, but guess what? It's aimed at you.
That's right.
And for some reason, you say, well, I was born here. Grandma, well, they can take her. Or, for that matter, anybody else. What makes that type of individual? Someone that has become completely, totally assimilated to the values of this society. And that you have actually a choice. You have actually a voice to say, yeah, I favor this candidate versus the other candidate. I'm going to vote for this person who represents the worst in our history, and I think in the history of the world, because he's going
Yes,
to mess up the world. Okay,
that's right.
so let
That's
me give
right.
you an explanation who these people are. These are predominantly males that have succumbed to the military. They are brainwashed in the military. And of course, where do they come out to work? Law enforcement. And it's also a very, very predominant mentality in those that are doing well. So if you're voting against their interests, which is financial or material, well, they're going to vote, with Trump. So to me, it's not impossible or difficult to understand, to explain why this proportion, 1/3 of our population are Trumpers.
I know.
You have them in your family. I have
Yes,
them
I
in my
do.
family too.
Yes, I do.
so,
Yes, I
so
do.
if we start from that premise, it's predictable that we have a lot of work to do after this election, and also, especially, if somehow this criminal uh, would end up back at the White House. I
Yes.
really don't think it will happen. I think that he will die in the process. But I tell you, I said the same thing in 2016.
And
So,
we should say that. And we should say that, Armando, because
yeah,
we have to be the voice that say that we have to fight and we have to wake up at the wheel and start, using our cars better and, driving those electrical cars or whatever. But we've got to be able to really move our communities and
yeah, yeah.
protect them from fascism, because that's what's going on right now.
Well, and it's the contamination of the entire country, because he has turned the entire USA into we versus them.
Yes,
And the right wing, the haters in this society are predominantly white. They're predominantly that right wing that I just described, that is also part of our community, and now is a growing number in the Black community as well. It's a totally different logic.
mhm,
Blacks have come from a whole different experience, but I tell you, even that's breaking down. I mean, it was like 10% Republicans, 90% Democrats. Now they're looking at probably 20% that are likely to vote for Trump. And all of this is part of the post-election analysis. But guess what? We may not be around to do post-election analysis. Remember that old saying, first he came for the for the socialists, right? And they first, and then they came for the priests and the unionists, and then there was nobody else. And this is exactly what could happen here, because he could be your next door neighbor, or he could be your coworker, or he could be even somebody in your family
Hmm.
that will begin to think, and is really very well defined now, is the movement towards becoming a religious democracy. Why? Because this is driven, highly driven by the right wing in the Protestant and those evangelist religious cults that have also penetrated not only Latinos in the US, throughout the Americas.
That's right.
I mean, I'm blown away how these Brazilians can convert Mexicans in broken Spanish in Mexico. And they're doing it here as well. So it's a challenge also for the religious institutions to step up. Where in the hell is the Catholic Church?
Thank you.
Mute.
Thank you.
And of course, I mean, this comes from an old critic. I don't know if you realize, but I was one of the Católicos por la Raza 21.
I remember.
At 21 years of age, I had already my mugshot taken, and that to me, because I was my jury was hung. Uh, I flipped off a big fat guy at the steps of the church where we were protesting on Christmas Day, 1969, and he came chasing after me. So I dropped him with a kick in the belly. But I didn't realize there was videos from two TV channels that were recording me. But that's what saved me, because there was an African American woman who held out on my. They dropped from 8 charges to only one, assault and battery. And so I was hung, but our legendary attorney, Oscar Zeta Acosta, talked me into pleading so that they would release from sending to prison or to county jail two of the brothers, Tony Salazar and Pedro Arias. They were going to have to two-time in there. So that was my first encounter with the law. Not the last, but uh,
It may
it's
not be for the future.
oh yeah, no, it's a yeah. So
Yeah.
it's interesting you asked that question, and that's in my opinion really our community needs to wake up.
Yeah.
I recently sat with Assemblyman uh, Josh Lowenthal, the son of
Wow.
Alden Lowenthal.
Wow.
You know that Josh went to the escuelita?
No way.
Yes, he attended. And I asked him that morning when we had breakfast, I said, Josh, was it you or was it Danny, his brother, that went to the school? He said, no, it was me. It's because of the escuela, and then they took him to the bilingual program at Wheeler Elementary
Yeah.
School.
Yeah.
He says, it's the reason why I speak Spanish today. And you know what? He
Yeah.
married a dreamer. Talk
Wow.
about talk about the he's now an assemblyman, okay? So
Yes.
so they asked me for my opinion. They asked me what can we do for the Mexican community at Avalon in
In
Carolina,
Catalina.
puros mexicanos.
Puro.
And it has been forever since back
Yes.
then.
Yes.
And so after they described what was going on, I said, well, look, it seems to me there's a lack of leadership. You need to develop uh, within that community the leadership to pull themselves up, to become proactive, to become. But what you have undocumented workers, you have old families that are also kind of like, well, that's the way it has always been. And you have the same institutions that provide services to that community. Long Beach Unified, the County of LA, and of course, the assemblyman's district covers that. So they're getting a barrage needs that are provided, and I told them, I'll develop a leadership development plan for you, but you need to get the school district on board.
That's
And
right.
you need to get maybe City College and Cal State Long Beach, get some interns out there, create the foundation for self-help,
That's
you
right.
know.
Like
And that's really
self-empowerment.
what going back to your question, that's what I anticipate. Still the challenge. Look, we are doing so well. There is people that are thriving because they come or they are second generation of people that are working 2 and 3 jobs. They're not sitting on their ass. They're not waiting
That's
for a
right.
welfare check. Why? Because they can't get it. Look what happened during the pandemic. Dreamers were denied the benefits that the colleges and universities were providing. Every student got some type of stipend. And of course, the other PPP money, all of that
That's
was
right.
because, well, they're illegals. Oh, but they're still human beings. We were dropping, and you know probably better than I do, the data of our casualties.
That's
What
right.
did the state of California do for us? We had no leadership.
Mhm. And that leadership came at the very local level in terms of
Oh,
these
yeah.
nonprofits, right? That's where it was. And I think that's kind of where the future is too, Armando. How do we, really bring in these nonprofit leaders who have been doing the community work very quietly and very, just diligently with our communities. And that's a great leadership group that we need to tap into.
Let me
And
give you a much broader vision. This is what I'm um, dedicating the rest of my days. Okay.
I want
the
to hear.
vision the vision is that we already are empowered by the fact that California, out of 40 million, is about, I would say, 48%. It will be more than half Latino. In California, we have maybe 10% that is non-Mexican. We don't have a huge population of Puerto Ricans or Cubans. The largest non-Mexican Latino population is the Central Americans. And of course, we're not discriminating against anybody, but envision this. This is the idea that I'm working on uh, to promote California, Mexico higher education and policies. You know that there is no academic exchange between California and Mexico.
Wow.
And this has been the case for more than 50 years. I worked in the 1990s at the CSU Chancellor's Office in international programs right here in downtown Long Beach. And it's the same today as it was then, actually worse, because since the pandemic, everything stopped. We were literally the only group that was doing study abroad for dreamers in the summers of 21, 22, 23, and today, regardless of the pandemic. I took, now in 25 groups, I've taken over 800 dreamers. The bulk of that comes after uh, the Trump era.
Yes.
I had only taken maybe 160 in 5 groups before the Trump era, and then after we blew out through that lawsuit against the Biden administration. We had 215 in 2021, another couple hundred 2022, about 150 last summer, and we've been taking groups already this year. I had a group of about 40 in January, and we're taking groups now through the end of the year, through the end of DACA, because DACA is on the chopping block.
That's
And
right.
this is amazing because dreamers are no different than you and I.
Hmm.
I mean, I was brought at 12 from Mexico, but I didn't come without papers. Ya venimos con papeles. We had policies of family unification. We have family. We came with a green card. And it took time, but we came without any major problem. Now you're talking about 10, 15 years waiting time.
Yeah.
So the bottom line is that we're all victims of and byproducts of this society. We attain certain privilege, certain expectations, certain attitudes of entitlement. And dreamers are no different. In fact, they're even more damaged goods
Yeah.
because they carry that monkey in their back. And I've seen all types. I've had Trumper dreamers, girl. Okay. I'm not, I'm not, I'm not,
Wow.
okay? And of course,
That's a new one.
most of them don't give a damn. And after they finish, they get their ticket punched.
Yeah.
I'm done. So my question is, why is it that in the last 7 years, the 4 years of Trump, the 3 years of Biden, dreamers have been denied applying for DACA? You know, there's about 120,000 every year that become eligible. We're talking about in the range of 800,000.
Yeah.
And these are kid brothers of dreamers that have DACA.
Yeah.
And why isn't there an explosion? Why isn't there a massive movement just by dreamers themselves?
Hmm.
This is what dreamers did before 2012 when asshole Obama, oops,
Okay.
uh, gave us a token. If you saw that video in the newsletter, it's called No Más Obras, No More Crumbs. Dreamers, you have to wake up because right now we're not getting anything. And there's going to be no immigration reform unless the House, the Senate, and the White House are Democratic. But
That's
we
right.
had the same conditions under Obama
Yes.
when he first
Yes.
took office. And of course, they decided they can wait. We're going to go all out for health reform. Well, why couldn't you do both and create jobs like we did in the 70s and in the
That's right.
30s?
Yeah.
No. Obama was thinking, I want to be appointed to the Supreme Court. He was already rubbing his hands that Hillary was going to be the president. She would appoint him. I tell you, I have no no respect whatsoever for that era and for that total malfeasance of the Democratic Party, and to this day. But it's not gonna make do me or anybody any good just to say let's punish the Democrats. What are we gonna do? Vote for Trump? Hell no.
Hell no. And
So
that's the
so
dilemma. That's the dilemma we have, Armando. And I
exactly.
think that, we can go back to the work that we've done in our communities for decades. And that's the work that's going to have to happen in the future. And I really want to thank you personally, Armando, for the influence, being one of my mentors and being an influence for so many young people in the United States and now in Mexico. And I really appreciate the work you've done and being who you are. And so thank you. And we look forward to more decades from you and the work that you're going to bring to. That's right. That's right. We have to.
Let me
Gracias.
just conclude with this vision.
Please.
So what we're promoting right now are two bills in California. One called the California Mexico Higher Education Development and Academic Exchange Program. That's AB 2852. That's by Eduardo Garcia. Uh, the other is AB 2633. That is, the title escaping me right now, but it's a brilliance beyond borders. The first bill is the one that was introduced on our behalf to create a fund that would be binational, to create a resource to promote academic exchange, just to cover living expense and travel. But it would be premised on one-to-one exchange. In other words, you send me one and I'm going to send you one. That way, you avoid anybody paying out-of-state tuition, which, as you know, is humongous and is profiteering for the public universities. Now, why would they want to do that for Mexicans? Because we are each other's number one economic business partner. Because
Right.
we are the fifth and the 12th largest economies of the world, but we have no plans. We have no policies. We have no idea, unless you can tell me otherwise, how we prepare for the next pandemic.
Yes.
And the same thing as it relates to the workforce, the economy, the environment, the energy. I mean, every aspect. And so you have this mega region of 130 million Mexicans and 40 million Californians, but half of them are of Mexican origin. So now you have a region of 150 out of 170 million that is one of the most productive regions in the world, and we have no policies. That's
Incredible. Well,
it.
we're going to leave with that, Armando, because I think that says it all. And the work that we have to continue to do for the future of our communities. So we've had such an honor to have Armando Vasquez Ramos, the president and CEO of the California Mexico Studies Center. Gracias, Armando. What a great honor.
Un honor para mí. Gracias.
Okay,
Sarcasm material.
okay, I can do that.